I was informed there wasn't space for my little girl and me at the holiday feast. Yet my sister's neighbors were seated comfortably with places reserved just for them. I didn't make a scene. I simply displayed the presents we brought and walked out. My mother was yelling across the room for me not to leave. My father pleaded with me to stay and talk, but by then it was too late. The Christmas meal was already half finished when it hit me that no chair had been set for us. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't forgotten. The dining table was packed tight, chairs squeezed together, plates already messy with sauce and half-eaten meat. I stood frozen in the entrance holding Ellie, clutching the packages we'd wrapped together the evening before, and nobody shifted an inch. Amanda caught my gaze for a second before glancing away fast. Mom was giggling at whatever one of the neighbors had said. Dad gave me a quick nod, like my presence had only just registered. I stayed silent. I just stood there like some forgotten cousin who'd wandered in without an invitation. There were faces around that table I didn't recognize at all. People from the street, maybe friends of Amanda's. One of them had draped their jacket over the back of the only empty chair left. Ellie pulled at my coat, confused and quiet. I whispered that we'd only drop off the gifts and go. I stepped to the tree, set the bags down gently, double-checked that the card with the thick envelope was still sealed. Then I turned and headed out. That's when Mom's voice cut through the chatter loud enough to kill every conversation. "Don't go." Dad jumped up so fast he bumped someone's plate. He shouted my name, said we needed to talk, but Ellie was already tugging her boots back on. The drive home was nothing but the soft crinkle of wrapping paper shifting in the back seat. Things hadn't always been this cold. But everything changed the day my husband walked out. He didn't just leave. He moved one street over with the woman who used to wave at me from her porch. Jenna. The same Jenna who once borrowed my crock-pot and gave it back with burnt onion flakes glued to the bottom. My mother's response. She said it was understandable. That Jenna knew how to take care of herself. After that, my whole family seemed to agree I was broken. Amanda quit inviting me anywhere unless she needed an extra pair of hands to decorate or clean. My parents chuckled when I mentioned night classes. Dad kept asking if I was finished, feeling sorry for myself. Yet, they treated me like the family disgrace who couldn't keep a husband. Like I was shaming them simply by breathing without a ring on my finger. But what they didn't realize, sitting there with their wine and strangers in my seat, was that they had just refused the greatest gift they would ever receive from me. There was a check inside one of those packages, $10,000. And that was only the start. 2 hours after walking out of Amanda's house, my phone began to explode. First Mom, then Dad, then Amanda. I ignored every call. I curled up on the couch with Ellie watching the same holiday movie for the 4th time that week. She kept asking why we left so early. I told her we were having our own special Christmas, just us. I told her it was better this way. Truth was, I didn't trust my own voice if I picked up. Not yet. Less than a day later, Amanda texted again. She asked if I could swing by to grab the gifts I'd left. Said they didn't want to mix them up with anyone else's. I stared at those words for ages before deleting the message. They thought I was throwing a tantrum, that I was overreacting, that I'd come crawling back like every other time. Then on Christmas night at 9:47 p.m., the real panic began. Dad rang 4 times in a row, left a frantic voicemail on the 5th. His voice cracked when he mentioned the envelope. Said I had to call right now. I didn't, because that envelope wasn't just a greeting card. Inside was a brief note, for the roof repairs, happy holidays, and a check for $10,000 written to my parents. No conditions, no lecture, just a gift I'd saved for in secret while they mocked me in group chats and over coffee. A gift I still intended to give despite every slight, until I saw those strangers parked in the seats meant for my daughter and me. By the following morning, I had 11 missed calls, 2 tear-soaked voicemails from Mom, and a single stunned text from Amanda that read, "Are you actually serious?" I didn't answer. I opened my banking apps instead, canceled the 3 auto payments I'd been covering for years, their Wi-Fi, their power, and the credit card Mom opened in both our names for bonus points. They never once noticed I was the one keeping their house lit. They were about to learn the hard way. At 2:12 p.m., Dad tried again. Then he texted, "We have to talk, please, you don't understand." Oh, I understood crystal clear. They didn't want me in their home, but they wanted everything I provided. That truth burned deeper than the empty chair ever could. Not the missing place setting, not the strangers they chose over their own blood, but the absolute certainty that even now, as their world tilted, they still believed they'd done nothing wrong. I was finished handing out second chances, and I hadn't even revealed the next surprise. I ignored every ring the day after Christmas, and the day after that. I watched the calls roll in: Dad, Amanda, even Uncle Dave, like my number had become the family emergency line. I kept the ringer off and let each one die. They had finally torn open the envelope. At first, I imagined them shoving my bags aside like always, expecting cheap lotion sets or another mug. But when they saw the check, $10,000, signed, dated, no snarky comment, something cracked. Because that's when the frantic calling began. And that's when I knew the real gift was coming. The second surprise wasn't wrapped in ribbon. It had no tag, but it would sting far worse. Because it was power, quiet power I'd held for years and never flexed. My name was still attached to more than they realized. I logged into Dad's checking account, technically joint since I'd helped them refinance a decade ago. I transferred every penny into my own account and shut it down. Then I killed the 3 recurring bills they never knew I paid. Their mobile plan, their internet, their electricity. Mom used to phone me whenever the lights flickered, convinced I had a magic fix. Dad never bothered learning how any bill got paid. They assumed the universe handled it. Well, the universe just clocked out. My first call from Amanda came at 10:14 a.m. I let it roll to voicemail. An hour later, she texted from her husband's phone. Wanted to know if I'd touched something, because the internet was dead and Mom's phone showed the account suspended. I told her to contact the provider. Then I delivered the knockout blow. An email to both parents with the scanned disassociation documents my attorney finished weeks earlier. A full untangling. No joint credit, no cosign debt, no lingering ties. I wasn't simply leaving. I was bolting the gate. By nightfall, I had 8 voicemails, 3 blocked numbers, and 1 email from Dad that just said, "Please." We had no idea. No idea about what. That I overheard every joke after the divorce. That I noticed the invitations that stopped coming. The way they praised Jenna for moving on while treating me like a cautionary tale. They knew. They simply didn't care until it hurt their wallet. Now it was hurting everything else. And I still hadn't told them the whole truth. By the morning of the 28th, the fake anger was gone. Mom called from Amanda's phone and left a message that began with, "I know you're upset," and ended in sobs. Dad sent a voice memo admitting, "I screwed up for the first time I can remember." I stayed silent. Their remorse wasn't real. It was fear wearing a mask. They'd thrived for years on a system where I quietly fixed their messes, swallowed their venom, and kept the heat on without ever asking for gratitude. Now that the system collapsed, they were terrified. Not repentant, just terrified. Amanda showed up at my door around noon. No warning text, just knocking. When I opened it, she tried to push past me inside. I blocked the doorway. She said everyone was falling apart and demanded to know what I wanted. Like I'd taken them prisoner. I told her there was no bargaining. That's when she spat it out. "You think you're better than us now because you waved some money around." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she was so completely wrong. The money was never leverage. It was supposed to be love, a fresh start, a gift, the very last kindness I had left to offer. Amanda stormed off muttering about blood being thicker than water, as if they hadn't already drowned that bond in gravy and lies. By evening, Dad had sent 3 more emails, each more pitiful than the last. He wrote that they couldn't get through to the power company, that the call center kept transferring them in circles. Said they had no passwords, no idea what to tell the reps, that the account was registered under my email from 10 years back. Then he begged, "Just walk us through it. After that, we'll leave you alone." That sentence stopped me cold for a moment, because it was the raw truth buried in all the noise. They never saw me as family, just a helpful neighbor, a fix-it girl, a spare part. I went upstairs, sat with Ellie while she worked on a puzzle, and decided what came next. I had one final card, one thing they'd never see coming. I drafted a group email to everyone. Mom, Dad, Amanda, a handful of cousins who'd sat mute at that dinner table while I stood in the doorway holding my child. Subject line: "Since you all love surprises at Christmas." The body was brief. Some of you knew exactly what was said about me when I wasn't around. I stayed quiet for years, but I'm done being part of this. You'll understand more tomorrow morning. Then I attached the PDF. They'd know the second they opened it. Page 1 read, Notice of Complete Severance. Family and financial, effective immediately. I braced for silence, or maybe more tears. Maybe Amanda would subtweet some garbage. Maybe Mom would write a 10-page apology I'd never open. But what I got was uglier and louder. The email landed like a bomb. Not just in my parents' inboxes, but in the family group chat I'd never been added to. Someone screenshot and forwarded everything to me. People were floored. A few fired off angry replies. Most said nothing. The subject line alone rattled cages. And the document, total separation from every obligation, personal and financial, was ice cold and airtight. I expected fallout. What I didn't expect was panic twisting into something vicious. It started with Amanda. 10 texts back to back. One actually read, "This isn't you. You're not this heartless." I nearly laughed again. Then she sent a photo of Mom curled on the couch crying, like guilt was a weapon that still worked on me. I didn't reply. Around midnight, someone tried to reset my email password. Gmail flagged it instantly. Same town. Same ISP. I changed every password I owned and turned on two-factor everything. Then I checked the shared streaming account and saw a login 6 minutes earlier. I booted every device except mine. That was only the opening act. The next morning, Ellie's school phoned. The admin sounded puzzled. Someone claiming to be my mother had called saying I'd authorized her as the new emergency contact and asked to handle pickup for the week. My blood turned to ice. I told them under no circumstances. I scrubbed every name from the contact list except mine, added a secret phrase no one else knew. They weren't panicking anymore. They were clawing for control. I spent the afternoon on with my attorney. I laid it all out. The login attacks, the school stunt, the sudden desperation to crawl back into my accounts. He said I'd documented enough, that if they pushed further we could file restraining orders. Not just financial, physical if necessary. I hated that we'd arrived here, but fear wasn't in me anymore, just fury, clear, clean fury. That evening Amanda returned. I saw her on the doorbell camera. She dragged Dad with her. Light snow fell. They wore the coats I'd gifted them last Christmas. They stood on the porch a long time without ringing, like freezing would shame me into opening. Then they rang, twice. I stayed upstairs, lights off. Ellie was asleep. Dad stepped closer to the door and shouted loud enough for neighbors to hear. It wasn't only us. She knew it all, Jenna. I froze. He stared up at the dark window. I didn't flinch. Then he said she was at Thanksgiving. They planned the whole thing. I had no clue what he meant at first. I hadn't been invited to Thanksgiving. They'd told me not to come, said it was too soon after the split, that everyone needed space. But now he was saying Jenna had been there, with my family. Planning what? They left after I killed the porch light. I sat in the dark piecing it together. The neighbors at Christmas, the missing chairs, the timing, the smirks, the envelope, planned. It was never simple neglect. It was deliberate replacement. I didn't break when I learned my husband had sat at my parents' Thanksgiving table with his mistress. I didn't scream. I just sat on my bed staring at the proof, feeling the last thread snap inside me. I wasn't surprised anymore. It only confirmed what I'd already begun to accept. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd erased me. That morning I called my lawyer and told him to file everything. Financial, legal, personal, total separation. No more shared anything. We submitted all of it within 48 hours. It was done. My parents lost every lifeline I used to provide without fanfare. Internet cut. Phones dead. Emergency credit line canceled. They'd have to rebuild from zero the way I did when my husband disappeared overnight. Only they no longer had me to catch them. Fair is fair. Still, I needed one final act. I didn't want loose ends. I didn't want them rewriting history later, claiming they never understood why I vanished, saying I lost my mind. So I called them, both parents, together. I told them this was the last conversation we'd ever have, and I meant it. Mom picked up. Dad was already on speaker. I said calmly that I knew it all now, that I knew about Thanksgiving, that I knew Jenna sat at their table, that I knew my husband ate their food while they smiled and passed the gravy, pretending they hadn't picked a side, that they welcomed the woman he cheated with and banned the woman he abandoned. They didn't deny a word. Dad muttered something about avoiding drama, and Mom dissolved into tears. She said she thought seeing him would upset me too much. I reminded her I'd been paying their bills for years, that I'd brought a $10,000 check to put under their tree, that I carried it there despite every insult. And they still chose her. Then I told her the check was canceled. Bank confirmed it void. They would never touch a cent. Their roof would rot until they fixed it themselves. Silence. I told them one more thing, that I had documented everything. Every call, every payment, every cruel remark. Every time they rolled their eyes when I mentioned Ellie's counseling or told me to stop causing a scene. I had receipts. And if they ever tried to twist the story, I would shout the truth from every rooftop. She whispered, "Are you really doing this?" I said yes. And that this phone call was the last kindness they'd ever get from me. Then I ended the call. After that, I blocked every number, left every family chat for good, deleted shared calendars, killed birthday reminders, erased every photo of them from my phone. Ellie and I began again. New Year's Eve, I made pizza from scratch and let her stay up until the ball dropped. We danced in sock feet across the living room. She asked if we'd ever visit Grandma again. I said no, sweetheart, not anymore. But we could build our own family now, one that never made us feel tiny. It didn't lift overnight, but the heaviness started slipping away. I slept through the night. My phone didn't make me flinch. I stopped writing comeback speeches in the shower. Silence felt weird at first. Then it felt like breathing. The past didn't disappear, but I stopped dragging it behind me, and that was the real present I gave myself. Quick update 6 weeks later. Nothing for weeks. No texts from Amanda, no surprise calls, no vague Facebook posts I'd have to decode. It felt like they'd evaporated. I started to believe they finally understood, that they'd stay gone forever. Then last Friday, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. It was from Dad. He didn't say sorry. He didn't ask about Ellie once, just a few scratched lines. He wrote that the house was falling apart faster, that the bank denied their loan because their credit collapsed without my name attached. He ended with, "We never thought it would come to this." I didn't write back, not because the urge wasn't there. It was, for maybe 5 whole minutes. But I folded the letter, slid it into the envelope, and tucked it into a drawer I never open. I don't need to set it on fire. I just don't need to hold it anymore. Ellie's laughing again. She invents games at recess, comes home with paint on her sleeves. Last week, we started Friday pancake nights, no matter what, just us. Last time she said it's her favorite day of the whole week. That's every answer I'll ever need that I chose right. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop auditioning for people who already gave your role to someone else. I stopped auditioning, and I never looked back.